My name is Gloria Lorraine. You can call me Lorraine. Some people call me Glow. Either way. On Tuesdays, I sit down and we talk about true crime. So if you have some spare time, let's go. Please be advised that these episodes are intended for entertainment purposes and mature audiences only. It may contain graphic crime scene descriptions, strong language, and adult dialogue. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey. Hey guys. So I just wanted to have a little chit chat. Get that intro out of the way, but I wanted to have a little chit chat. I am gonna end up changing it to Tuesday so it can be like a true crime Tuesdays. And this is my second video, and I'm really excited because my first video, it got like 8 likes. No, it got 8 views. No, like 2 likes. I'll take it. Anyway, today, so I'm gonna post this one on Monday for you guys, but the following one is going to be on Tuesday. Okay. So today we are going to Corpus Christi, Texas. It's at the bottom of Texas. It's by the water, by the bay, Gulf of Mexico. It is a beautiful city. I actually grew up there. Hey. But we are taking it back to the 80s. And the 80s, it wasn't what it was now. And in the 80s, the main town was like by the water, and it kind of like branched out. Anywho, on February 4th, 1983, Corpus Christi Police Department got a 911 phone call from a lady by the name of Wanda Lopez. Wanda Lopez was 24 years old. She was a single mother of one. She ended up dropping out of high school to provide for her daughter because her husband had left her when she was 4 months pregnant. And she ended up getting a job at a gas station because she needed to provide for her daughter. The gas station was in a dodgy area because it was right across from the strip, so it was kind of like further out from the main city. And Wanda was kind of used to men coming in and out, especially from the strip, or the gentleman's club, if you will, kind of like messing with her and things like that. Like her father would sometimes park outside until she was done with her shift. She would get off late nights. But on February 4th, 1983, Wanda kind of she kind of knew something was a little off. She said that there was a gentleman outside with a knife, and she ended up calling 911, and they were like, well, has he threatened you yet? And she was just like, well, not yet. And they took it as she was having, unfortunately, the one that answered the phone call kind of took it as, and she's just, she had an attitude, call back if something was, if anything else happens, right? And unfortunately, she ended up calling back, but at this time it would have been too late. Because on the 911 call, all you pretty much hear is her being assaulted. And you just hear on the 911 call, like, I'll give it to you. And then this is not working out, so I'm just going to go back with the blender. But on the 911 call, she all you could really hear was her yelling, I'll give it to you. And the police department was on his way. There was a couple of eyewitnesses stating that it was a man in a flannel or gray shirt that hurt Wanda, and he was trying to take her to the back of the store. So after he assaulted her with the knife, he was like trying to wrestle with her to get her into the back of the store, like pulling her by her hair. But he eventually saw that there were people coming in the store, and he ended up booking it. Right, the manhunt was about 45 minutes long. They ended up finding a gentleman under a truck with no shirt or shoes. And they brought that gentleman they brought him back to the gas station to be identified by the eyewitness. And the eyewitness kind of saw him in the car, and he was like, yeah, that's him. Great. Took him in. And he was like, the gentleman was saying, I wasn't there. I didn't do it. I don't know what you're talking about. I was with my friend Maria Perales. So they were only really going off of the eyewitness. And the detective ended up going to, go see how strong his alibi was. And unfortunately, when they found Miss Perales, she was at her baby shower. She was pregnant, and she was at her own baby shower. She's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I was at my baby shower. I wasn't with him. And so they come back to the guy, and they're just like, okay, so what's up? Like, we know you're lying. You weren't with Perales. And he was like, okay, I was lying because I'm on parole, and I wasn't trying to get in trouble, but I know who did it. But we are getting way ahead of ourselves. So real quick, who is this guy? The gentleman was a guy by the name of Carlos Deluna. Carlos Deluna was from Corpus Christi, Texas. He was born on March 15th, 1962. So that makes him a Pisces. I don't know too many Pisces, so I really don't know the characteristics of a Pisces, but he was a Pisces. He grew up in Corpus Christi, Texas, and he was said to be a sweet boy. He never met his father. And then he did say that his stepdad was kind of a jerk, very abusive, and a drunk. So he never had that type of male figure in his life. And his siblings did say that they kind of raised themselves because their mother was always working. He was one of 7 children, so the mother was always working, and his father was kind of like, or his stepdad was, wasn't really there present either. And it was said that Carlos de Luna had a learning disability, and it got to a point where he was bullied a lot in school, and he ended up dropping out at ninth grade. And he was described as very childlike. His sister described him when they would do paper routes to get a little bit of money. They would do newspaper routes, and he was terrified of like little dogs coming at him, and he was still a child. I still don't think boys kind of grow up into men until very, very late in their lives. But anyway, he was described as very childlike. Carlos de Luna he ended up starting to get in trouble. He was actually arrested for the first time when he was 15. And his crimes mostly consisted of being a tagger, stealing, petty theft, alcohol. I mean, as far as like public intoxication, disorderly conduct, you know, kind of like being a little menace when you're a kid, but kind of hanging around the wrong people being a kid. But most of his crimes were said to be misdemeanors. His crimes were more of petty theft. He stole his brother's truck one time and he wrecked it. He was known for, unfortunately, he was known for stealing money. He stole money from his mom's purse, and I can only imagine because they were living in poverty already, and I'm sure that money was already spoken for. So his family got to a point where they cut him off. They really weren't trying to hear him because he kept, I mean, it's hard to trust a thief. That's like one thing you can't really trust, and a liar. But that was his background, right? He was a thief, and his family was eventually starting to cut him off because it was just getting too much. You couldn't trust him. He ended up in prison for his list of activities, but the one that tipped it off was he attempted to SA a woman. He was stalking her in the parking lot, and he broke 3 of her ribs and got took off her underclothes, her underwear, and they ended up locking him away. He did some time for it, but when he got out, he got into concrete work. And I think this was the one time where he was, you know, trying to find balance in concrete work, and he was abiding by his parole. He was abiding by his parole. So back to the night. How did Carlos end up under the truck? He was saying that the day of the incident with Wanda Lopez, that he was hanging out with Mary Ann Perales, and a gentleman came up to them, and he was wanting to hang out with them, and he ended up saying, hey, let's go to the strip or the gentleman's club and, you know, have a couple of beers. After talking to the guy, he realized that he had seen him in the neighborhood when he was younger, and then he ended up meeting him again in county. Like, they had crossed each other in county, so they were kind of celebrating that they were both out, and he was like, all right, let's go, let's do it. And his name was also Carlos. So they ended up going to Wolf Eyes, and they were having a couple of beers, and Carlos Hernandez, the gentleman's name was Carlos Hernandez. Carlos Hernandez said, hey, I'm gonna go get some cigarettes, I'll be back. This is what Deluna is telling the investigators at this time. And he was like, fine, let's go. Or he said he'll go, right? And he'll wait for him. So Deluna was saying that he was taking longer than expected, so he wanted to go and see what was going on. And whenever he was outside, he did see that Hernandez was assaulting Wanda, and he stated that he took off running because he heard the police sirens, and because he was on parole and he didn't want to be a part of it because it would have sent him back, and he wasn't trying to do that. Well, on the phone call, you do hear there was multiple phone calls coming in on the dispatch after Wanda had made her phone call. There were a lot of eyewitnesses that began calling in. They heard the commotion, and then they saw him running. They saw, and on the phone call, you can hear some of them say, "Oh, he's wearing a white button-up shirt. He's wearing a flannel shirt. He's wearing a gray shirt. He's Mexican, and he's running, right?" One of them said that he ran behind the store east, and then the other one was running north. And so there was a lot of confusion on the call, but they ended up finding Deluna under the truck. So they kind of stopped looking. You know, they didn't go any further once they found Deluna under the truck. And so whenever he went, they just went off the eyewitness, and the eyewitness did say that, you know, he was wearing a flannel, but when he was inside the truck, he wasn't wearing a shirt. So Deluna was already in custody, and they were trying to. Deluna was already in custody, and they were saying that he continued to say that he was innocent, that he didn't do this, he know who did, and they were already kind of fed up with him because they did find out that he was lying already once. And so they said, "All right, Carlos, who did it? Like, who did it?" And he's saying it was Carlos Hernandez. The prosecutor, or the attorney, and what upset me more was, like, even the attorney, you could see him to this day was like, all those prisoners say they had a lousy, everybody on death row said they have a lousy attorney, but in this particular situation, it was kind of, you should have fought more. But anyways, back to them interrogating Deluna. They kept saying, "Okay, Carlos, so who's the guy? Who's the guy that you're saying that did it if it wasn't you?" And he's like, "It was Carlos Hernandez. I'm telling you, it's Carlos Hernandez. Go look for this guy." And they continued to, they said that they looked, but I think they just wrote it off as like he's lying. The eyewitness said that it was him. And they kind of just went off of that. They did just go off of the eyewitness. Carlos Hernandez was found with no blood on his clothes, on him. There was no fibers of blood on his shirt or his, because they ended up finding his shoes, and there was no blood on his shoes. But they continued to prosecute Carlos Deluna for the murder of Wanda, and it was a capital murder because they said that it was a robbery. That it was a robbery with a murder, so it made it capital murder. So when they were looking for this Carlos Hernandez, they continued to say, "There's no guy named Carlos Hernandez. There's nobody by the name of Carlos Hernandez. We don't know what you're talking about." So they continued to pursue Deluna for the murder of Wanda. And on the trial, they really just went off an eyewitness. There was no evidence to say that any fibers or any blood on him. There was nothing. There was no physical evidence other than people say, "No, he was there and I saw him. That was the guy. I saw him." And unfortunately, the trial did not go in his favor. The defense attorney didn't really get too much on her. They didn't get too much on Deluna. As far as whenever they would throw stuff at him, he he wouldn't defend it. I guess unfortunately it was just a court appointed attorney, and it came out that Carlos had the attempt of SA on a woman, and they kind of took it as he was a predator and that he would do it again, that this was him doing it again. And unfortunately, he ended up being convicted guilty for capital murder and a robbery, and they did determine that it would be the death penalty. He was on death row for the murder of Wanda Lopez, and the news reporter that was there that night, she for some reason wanted to continue the story, and she kept in touch with Carlos, and to the end Carlos kept saying, you know, I didn't do this, but they never went any further. Like, case closed, he was convicted as guilty. That was it. He appealed the courts for it, and it was denied. They ended up denying it. They were trying to grant him clemency, but it didn't work out as Carlos had hoped, because to grant someone clemency, they have to determine that the attorney was incompetent, like asleep while they're on trial or on drugs, and unfortunately that wasn't the case, or a probable cause to say that he didn't do it. And unfortunately there was nothing that they could convince they could convince them to grant him the clemency. So on December 7th, 1989, Carlos Deluna was brought to Huntsville for the execution by lethal injection, and they had brought him in at 9 a.m. to prepare him for the day. And during the process, there is a pastor that would come in to kind of persuade their emotions, is how they described it, just to get them to calm down, kind of accept what was going to happen rather than fight. Sorry, I didn't mean to cover my mouth, but just to accept what was going to happen rather than to fight it. I'm on wheels and I'm like getting out of the frame. Hold on. So Carol Pickett was assigned to him, and he was very familiar to helping the inmates on death row. But he was saying that he remembers Carlos. Like, Carlos was one of them that stay with you. And if you've ever worked in the death industry, or, you know, medical field, you know, there's always that one or a couple, a handful that stay with you from their story. And this was the one for Carol Pickett. He said that he brought in Carlos at 9 a.m. to prepare him for the day, and they did say that, you know, he was there to help him not fight. You know, do what you can, and so that they don't fight. So Carol was like, okay, that's fine. He was used to it. He described Carlos as childlike. He described him saying that when he was praying with him, Carlos wept. He wept on his knees, and he asked him, you know, like, what do you want to do? You know, this was kind of like his last day. What did you want to do? And he was just saying, you know, I just want to write to my family. I just want to write some letters to my family. And Carol agreed. Mr. Pickett agreed. And he said that he would hold his letters until the end and he would mail them after. So he said, okay. And during the time they were getting closer, and he did say, you know, I didn't have a dad. Can I call you daddy? And Carol kind of thought it was odd at first, but then he could see the innocence of him going back to the childlike presence of him. And he was saying, you know, I never knew my father. And he did say that, you know, it's a different type of emotion when you call someone daddy, you know, like that's like a comfort word, he was saying. And Carol agreed. He said, yeah, that's fine, you can call me daddy. And he was just very thankful. And Carol did say that with most of his death row inmates, they would always be like, oh, don't let them see me sweat. Don't let them see me sweat. Don't let them see me that I'm in fear. You know, wipe my brows, you know, when I get sweaty. And it was more of like a prideful thing. But he said that Deluna was more of a, I just want you to hold my hand through the process. Like, he did say that he was terrified. And he just wanted Carol to hold his hand through the process. And Carol was just saying, okay, that's fine. You know, like, I'll hold your hand as much as I can. But there are certain times that I am not allowed to touch you. And Deluna was just saying, okay, that's fine. And he did. You know, Deluna's last meal was strawberries and ice cream. And they went into the execution room. They described it as a bed with blue walls. And Deluna did say, you know, like, y'all need to be nice to him. He's my daddy for the day. And that is really just heartbreaking, knowing, because he never really had a father. He never really had somebody to stay by his side through it, or just being a child, you know. Never really had somebody to stay by his side like that. And Carol was saying that execution usually only takes 6 minutes, that it is said to be done in 6 minutes, and it took them 10 because they were having malfunctions. And he felt horrible for Carlos, because he did tell him that it would be painless, that there's 3 injections, and that the first injection was supposed to paralyze him to where he wouldn't feel anything, and the second one is to paralyze the lungs, and then the third one is to paralyze the heart, to stop the heart. And he said that he just felt horrible about it, because he said that he felt that he lied to him. And Carlos Deluna did pass on December 7th, 1989, which made him 27 when he passed away. He did have 2 phone calls. One of them was his brother, Manuel. And his brother was talking to him, saying, you know, like, I mean, at this point, you really don't got nothing to lose. What's up? Did you do it? And to the end of him, he's like, no, man, I didn't do it. I'm telling you, like, Carlos Hernandez did this. Like, I'm innocent. And his brother was like, you know, I don't know a Carlos Hernandez. He's like, yes, you do. You know him. And they ended up saying their goodbyes. He ended up calling Karen, the news reporter. That was his last phone call, was Karen. And they had developed a relationship as pen pals, so they were very close. And she asked the same thing, like, man, like, this is it, you know, tell me, if anybody, tell me, get it off your chest, you know. And he was just continue, no, I didn't do it. They're gonna execute an innocent man. And she kind of like believed him at this point, she said, because at this point they were right. You know, he didn't have anything to lose other than he didn't have anything to lose. He was about to be executed within a couple of hours for the murder of Wanda Lopez. And he remained innocent to the last of him. And he did pass away at 27. Who is Carlos Hernandez? Carlos Hernandez was in fact no phantom. He was a real person. He was born in Corpus Christi, Texas. He was born on July 15th, 1954. And he's a Cancer, which kind of upset me because I'm a Cancer, and it's just like, but he's a July Cancer, and those are a little different. They are a little different. But I digress. He's a Cancer. Not very loving, not very comforting. He was described as scary, bloodshot eyes, mean, and he was very cocky. He bragged a lot. He was very abusive to women. His girlfriends described him as abusive. They did describe him as an alcoholic, and everybody knew that Carlos Hernandez carried a knife. Like, that was his signature, a knife. And it was said that he would talk to this knife like it was a person, and he would brag a lot about the women that he would hurt. They did say that he would tell people that he's the one that killed Wanda, and that he was laughing at Deluna because his tecayo would take the rap for him. Like the guy that looks like his doppelganger is what it is. His doppelganger was taking the rap for him, and he would laugh at him, and it just makes me so frustrated because to know everything that Deluna was going through, and no one bothered to look into it. And he, for the life of him, kept saying, I didn't do this, Carlos Hernandez did it. And everybody was saying, there is no Carlos Hernandez. And meanwhile, there was a Carlos Hernandez continuing to say, yeah, I did it. And he was laughing at Deluna because he was taking the rap for him. He would call him his tecayo, and he just felt invincible enough to continue to brag about other acts that he committed. He would say that there was this girl that he murdered her as well. Her name was Dahlia. She was a mother of one, and he ended up confessing to one of his girlfriends at the time, saying that he had picked up this woman by the name of Dahlia in a van. It was her van, and I think she was living in it, but he ended up saying that he picked up this woman in this van, and he sexually assaulted her, he strangled her, and he carved a X on her back, and all while her daughter was sleeping there in the van with them, which is why I believe she was living in her van. But he would continue to brag about everything that he did. And when it came down to Dahlia, Carlos left his knife, he left his chones there, his doo-doo stained chones there, and a beer can with his fingerprints, and they still managed to say it was a guy named Jesse. They still gave him the benefit of the doubt, like, oh, it was a guy named Jesse. Like, men brag all the time about what they did and what they didn't do, but he was actually arrested 20 to 30 times with that same knife. The same knife that was left at the scene with Wanda. He was arrested. He was always booked with that knife. Like, that was his thing. That was his thing. And he would talk to it like it was a person. One of his ex-girlfriends said that she was just terrified of him. Like, he would sleep with this knife, he would talk to this knife like it was a person. And they somehow still managed to blame a guy named Jesse. Okay, I'm so sorry. My phone ran out of memory, and I'm just like, now I gotta rush the end of the story, and I do apologize, guys. I ended up doing my makeup not on camera, but they ended up getting Carlos back because they after the guy that they were trying to blame, Jesse, didn't work out, they called Carlos Hernandez back in, and for whatever reason, when it was time to pursue the murder of Dahlia, all the evidence that linked it to Carlos disappeared. It disappeared. And so there was no conviction for Dahlia. There was no justice for her. Carlos Hernandez went out like a little wimp, and he ended up getting psoriasis of the liver. Okay, so that's not, I mean, I'm just saying, like, he should have gone out like freaking Deluna and it was injected, but he didn't. He ended up passing away from psoriasis in the liver while he was in county. He ended up going to county because he tried stabbing his landlord, Dinah Ibanez, and she was fortunately she was very fortunate to have gotten away, and that was like the one thing he was convicted for, and it was just like, all right, man, you're gonna go in. It was said that Carlos Hernandez was an informant for the police department, but I don't know, some say yes, some say no, that he usually had all the type of blackmail on everybody and anybody. But I do have to cut this one short. So guys, thank you so much for spending your time with me. Come look for me next week. I'll be here Tuesday. Other than that, please remember, you are greatly blessed, deeply loved, and highly favored.